All right, here we go again. Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus, almost everybody's heard of him. He discovered the American continents, North and South America. He was originally born on October 31st in the year 1451, and he died May 20th in 1506. This is a portrait of him. That's what he looked like. Ain't he a pretty person? The explorer Christopher Columbus made 4 trips across the Atlantic Ocean from the country of Spain in the years 1492, 1493, 1498, and lastly in 1502. He wanted to find a direct water route west from Europe to Asia, but he never did. Instead, he found the Americas. Though he didn't really discover the New World, literally millions of Native Americans already lived there. This might blow your mind, but when Columbus sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, 70 million people were living in Europe. England, France, Germany, Spain, all those countries added up. 70 million. In North and South America, we estimate that there were around 150 million people living there. So he didn't exactly find something that no human being had ever seen before. But why do we care? His journeys were part of the beginning of centuries of exploration and colonization of North and South America. He is part of the start of the so-called Age of Exploration. Last year, 7th grade, you would have read and learned about several different explorers who explored Mexico, New Spain, later on Texas, and went through there, Cabeza de Vaca, etc. Well, Christopher Columbus is the guy who started all of that. He's not the first one, but he's the guy who really solidified the beginning of it. Okay. He had a plan to seek a western sea passage to the East Indies. What are the East Indies? Well, it's the country of India and the islands close by. So it's India and the nearby islands. And why did he want to get there? Well, he was hoping to profit, to make a lot of money, from the lucrative is just a word that means you're able to make money off of it, spice trade. Spice trade. What is the spice trade? Well, when you're eating food, do you like salt, pepper, paprika? Any of those things? Back in the day, nobody had any of that. You'd have some bread, some water, maybe a veggie, if you were lucky. Nothing to put on your meat to season it, just the meat. Spices are all those different granulated, ground up things that we put on food to make it taste better. So people were really bored with the taste of food, and so they really wanted flavor in their food. Spices such as salt and pepper could give you that. And also, specifically, salt could be used to preserve food. If you had meat and you rubbed salt in it and got a lot of salt in it, it would dry it out, and then your meat would last longer. That way you could actually have some meat, although it'd be really salty. You could have meat in the middle of winter when you're holed up in your snowbound house and you can't get out and go hunt. So spices were very valuable. They allowed you to have certain foods during different times of the year, and they gave you flavor, which was something people didn't really have in Europe before the spice trade. But getting there to India was very difficult, so he said, I'll go across the ocean instead, not knowing there was something in the way. North and South America. So following his persistent requests, Queen Isabella I and King Ferdinand II of Spain agreed to pay for a journey west. Columbus left Spain in August 1492. So in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue with 3 ships. His ships were called the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. After a stopover in the Canary Islands, which would, if you look at this map, you leave Spain, you want to cross the oceans. The Canary Islands are these tiny little islands right here, and they're generally considered the last piece of land you can be on before crossing the ocean, which is going to take like 3 months. So after they stopped at the Canary Islands to get supplies, they made landfall. That means they got all the way over here on October 12th. Today we celebrate that as Columbus Day. He landed on an island in the Bahamas. This would be the Bahamas right here. And then he started visiting the islands of Cuba and Hispaniola. And he established a colony in what is now known as the country of Haiti. The first European settlement in the Americas since the Viking colonies 500 years earlier. The Vikings had started some colonies in Greenland, way up north, where it was really cold. But those colonies didn't last, and the Vikings didn't really come back. And even though the Vikings made it, nobody really knew about it. So it didn't really change anything. Okay, so these islands, which are North America, South America, these islands right here became known as the West Indies. The East Indies would be India, the islands nearby, and Columbus thought he had gotten there. He thought he was in the East Indies. He thought he'd gotten to India, but he was wrong. Native Americans were called Indians by Columbus and his men because they mistakenly believed that they had arrived in the East Indies. And he arrived back in Spain in early of 1493 with news of this. So everybody back in Europe goes, wait, you called them what? Because they're what? Well, pretty soon they had to figure, okay, maybe it's not. But they were used to calling them Indians by that point. So you have the East Indies and the West Indies. You're talking about the West Indies, you're actually talking about land associated that's close by to North and South America. Now, Columbus has gotten a lot of heat over the years. He was not necessarily a nice person. But what makes him different from those who visited and discovered America before him, the people who, if you are going to say a European discovered America, you would have to give that credit to the Vikings. And there is some evidence that the Chinese, a few years before him, actually made it to the west coast of America. But there wasn't a whole lot of impact from any of those things. You need to understand, about 10,000 years before Columbus, people living in modern-day China were living in an ice age. The whole planet was covered in ice. And because of ice is weird. It's when water solidifies, it actually gets bigger. So that meant that the water levels of the ocean actually went down. And that exposed a land bridge, the Bering Land Strait, from Russia today to Alaska today. And these people 10,000 years ago just walked across. I mean, they didn't know they were walking across what used to be and what in the future would become the bottom of the ocean, but they did. They walked across and they ended up in Canada, and they walked all the way down through North America and South America, and they populated it. Well, when the Ice Age ended and the sea levels rose again, it cut off that land bridge and people could no longer walk across. It wasn't until you had much more modern ships that people could actually cross back and forth. And people generally forgot that the continents were even there. So what you end up with for 10,000 years, you have a group of people, Native Americans, and genetic studies have shown that most Native Americans can trace their heritage to basically 8 family groups. So basically 8 really large families walked across the Bering Land Strait, the ones that survived, and populated the entire continent. 150 million people, all coming from 8 families. If that had gone on for 100,000, 500,000 more years, well, that's speciesism. That is part of evolution, which you learn about in your science classes. Christopher Columbus, when he interrupts that, when he visits North and South America, he does so not in a brief one-off. Others follow him, and that cut off part of human culture and human population rejoins the rest of the world. Diseases are shared between the two. Native Americans gave diseases to the Europeans, and the Europeans gave diseases right back. The European diseases killed way more. Out of that 150 million Native Americans we think were alive at that time, most of them died. Millions upon millions upon millions that we'll never know about all died. And they would have died not even knowing that Columbus had come over. They just, disease came through and killed them. That's all they would have known about. But yeah, he rejoined the species of humanity, and that's a pretty big deal. So let me start this paragraph over again. What makes him different from those that visited and discovered America before him was that European knowledge of the American continents was not lost after him. The knowledge of these new continents was permanent. That's why we care about Christopher Columbus. I'm talking too much. Was he a nice guy? No, not really. Did he do a lot of really messed up stuff? Yeah, he kind of did. Some of that stuff we'll learn about in class, but he is very important, even though he wasn't necessarily a nice guy. So, all right. Thank you very much. See you in the next one.